When you think you're observing reality, have you ever wondered why the harder you try to understand a problem, the more ambiguous it becomes? Why the more you analyze your emotions, the more distorted they become? Why the more you want to grasp the essence of a moment, the more it slips through your fingers? This is not just your subjective experience, but a profound truth that both quantum science and ancient Eastern wisdom point to. In 1927, physicist Werner Heisenberg discovered something that shook the foundations of science. We cannot simultaneously know with precision both the position and velocity of a quantum particle. Not because our technology isn't sophisticated enough, but because the act of observation itself changes what is being observed. Reality at the fundamental level does not exist independently of the observer. This is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, one of the most profound discoveries of modern science. But thousands of years before Heisenberg stepped into the laboratory, meditation masters had realized the same thing through the path of inner contemplation. They discovered that the observing mind cannot be separated from the object being observed, that the act of looking into the mind itself changes that very mind, that the seeker and the sought are not two separate entities. So what happens when these two paths of knowledge, one from the physics laboratory, one from the meditation cushion, meet? We will discover that both point to the same truth. Reality is not something fixed, objective out there waiting to be discovered. Reality is a dynamic flow where the observer and the observed co-create each moment together. And within this realization lies the key to liberation from all suffering caused by clinging to an illusory, fixed reality. This article will take you on a remarkable journey, from the microscopic world of quantum particles to the infinite space of enlightened consciousness, from mathematical equations to the direct experience of meditation. And most importantly, you will learn how to apply these insights to transform how you experience life every day. The uncertainty principle, when reality refuses to be measured. Imagine you're trying to photograph a bird in flight. If you use a fast shutter speed to capture the bird's exact position, the image will freeze the motion and you lose information about its flying speed. Conversely, if you use a slow shutter speed to capture the trajectory of movement, the bird will be blurred and you won't know exactly where it is at any specific moment. This is a simple metaphor for the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, but the reality is far deeper. In the quantum world, an electron is not simply a tiny marble flying around the nucleus. Before being observed, it exists as a probability cloud, a superposition of all possible positions and velocities. Only when we perform a measurement does this cloud collapse into a specific value. But here's the miraculous part. Measuring position precisely will make information about velocity completely uncertain and vice versa. Not because the measuring equipment isn't good enough, but because this is a fundamental limit of the nature of reality. Heisenberg expressed this with a simple yet profound mathematical equation. Delta x delta p greater than or equal to /2. This formula says that the product of uncertainty in position, delta x, and uncertainty in momentum, delta p, can never be smaller than a fundamental constant of the universe. This means the more precisely you know one aspect, the more you lose certainty about the other. Reality at the fundamental level refuses absolute precision. But the philosophical implications of this discovery go far deeper than the physics laboratory. It questions the nature of objective reality. If the act of observation changes what is observed, then does a real reality exist independent of consciousness? Niels Bohr, Heisenberg's colleague, said, "There is no quantum world. There is only an abstract quantum description. It is wrong to think that the task of physics is to find out how nature is. Physics concerns what we can say about nature. This doesn't mean reality doesn't exist, but that it doesn't exist in the way our discriminating mind imagines. Reality is not a collection of fixed objects with definite properties, but a network of relationships and possibilities. It doesn't exist there waiting to be discovered, but is revealed through interaction. The observer and the observed are not two separate entities, but two aspects of an indivisible whole. When Einstein objected to this view with his famous statement, "God does not play dice," Bohr replied, "Einstein, stop telling God what to do." But perhaps both were right in their own way. It's not that reality is random or chaotic, but that it transcends the rigid framework of binary logic that the human mind imposes upon it. It is neither determined nor random, neither existing nor non-existing, neither objective nor subjective. It is something that transcends all these categories. And this is where quantum science begins to resonate with the wisdom of meditation. Because what Heisenberg discovered in the laboratory, meditation masters had directly experienced in their minds. That reality cannot be captured by discriminating thought, that the observer and the observed are one, that the effort to grasp is precisely what causes truth to slip away. The uncertainty principle is not just a physical law. It is an invitation for us to reconsider the entire way we relate to reality. It asks, if the act of observation changes what is observed, then is the way we look at life creating the very problems we're trying to solve? If there is no fixed objective reality, then what are we clinging to when we assert, this is the truth? And if the observer and the observed are one, then who is experiencing this life? The observing mind, when the seer and the seen are one. Try a simple experiment right now. Close your eyes and observe your breath. Notice what happens. When you begin observing, is your breath still as natural as before? Does it become somewhat different, perhaps deeper, or more conscious, or even slightly forced? This is the uncertainty principle in the mind. The act of observation has changed what is being observed. In meditation, this is not an abstract concept, but a direct and vivid experience. When you sit in meditation and try to observe the mind, you quickly realize a paradox. The you that is observing and the mind being observed don't seem to be two separate things. When you try to capture a thought to examine it, it disappears. When you try to maintain a state of stillness, that very effort creates disturbance. The seeker and the sought keep merging into each other. The Buddha described this through the concept of non-self anatta. He didn't say that this self doesn't exist in the sense of nothingness, but that there's no fixed, independent, unchanging entity that can be called I. When you search for the self in meditation, you don't find anything fixed. You find a continuous flow of sensations, thoughts, perceptions, but there is no master standing behind all of this. Just as an electron has no definite position and velocity until it is observed, the self has no fixed nature until the discriminating mind creates it. Krishnamurti expressed this sharply. The observer is the observed. When you feel fear and you say, "I am afraid," you create an artificial separation between I, the observer, and fear, the observed. But in reality, there is no you separate from the fear. In that moment, you are the fear. This separation, the creation of an I standing outside looking at the experience, is the source of conflict. Because once there is separation, there is opposition. I want to eliminate fear. I want to control emotion. I want to change experience. But something miraculous happens when this separation dissolves. When you no longer stand outside observing fear, but simply have a total awareness of it, without judgment, without analysis, without trying to change it, then fear begins to transform itself. Not because you did anything to it, but because the light of pure awareness itself has a transformative quality. This is what meditation masters call choiceless awareness or non-discriminating mind. In this state, you experience something strange. The mind is no longer a tool for looking at reality, but is itself reality becoming aware of itself. Just as in quantum physics, where the act of measurement is an inseparable part of the phenomenon being measured, in meditation, awareness is not something that happens to experience, but is an aspect of that very experience. There is no seer separate from a seen. There is only a unified process of awareness and being aware. This is not some mystical state difficult to grasp, but something that can be directly experienced. When you hear a sound, A bird singing, for instance, in a pure moment of hearing, before the mind labels it bird, before it judges it pleasant or unpleasant. There is a moment where there is only sound. There is no you listening and bird sound being heard. There is only the event of hearing taking place. This is the direct experience of non-separation between subject and object. Quantum scientists discovered this through mathematics and experiments. Meditation masters discovered it through silence and observation. But both point to the same truth. Reality is not a static picture that consciousness looks at, but a dynamic process of which consciousness is an inseparable part. We are not simply neutral observers of an objective universe. We are co-creators, active participants in a manifestation of reality through each act of perception. And when you truly see this, not as an intellectual idea, but as a living experience, everything changes. Because if there is no fixed I separate from reality, then who is suffering? If the observer is the observed, then who is trying to change what? If mind and reality are one, then what is there to achieve? What is there to become? The collapse of the wave function, a metaphor for enlightenment. In quantum mechanics, there is a concept called the collapse of the wave function. Before being observed, a particle exists in a state of superposition. It is simultaneously in all possible positions with different probabilities. The wave function describes this entire spectrum of possibilities. But when a measurement is made, the wave function collapses into a single specific value. From countless possibilities, one concrete reality emerges. This is a beautiful metaphor for how the discriminating mind operates. Reality in its essence is an infinite field of possibility, open, flexible, unlimited. But when the individual mind, with all its concepts, beliefs, expectations, and fears, observes reality, it collapses these countless possibilities into a specific, limited experience. From infinite expansion, we create a small, fixed, bounded world. Think about a simple situation. You walk into a room full of strangers. Before you meet anyone, there are countless possibilities for how the encounter could unfold. But if you enter with the belief, I'm not good at socializing, your mind has performed a measurement. It has collapsed the infinite field of possibility into a concrete reality. You will notice signals that confirm this belief, ignore contradictory signals, and act in ways that reinforce the story you tell yourself. The wave function has collapsed, and a specific reality is created. But here's the miraculous thing. If you can become aware of this process happening, if you can catch the moment before the wave function collapses, you will experience an amazing freedom. You will see that reality is not as fixed as you think, that who you are is not an unchanging entity, but a possibility being created fresh in each moment. That life is not a pre-written script, but a continuous creative improvisation. In meditation, there are moments when you experience this directly. When the mind becomes very still, you can catch the moment before a thought fully forms. The moment when it is still an unrealized possibility. You can see how an undefined feeling gradually gets labeled and becomes sad or happy. You can witness the process by which the mind takes a direct, formless experience and turns it into a rigid, formed concept. Zen masters call this beginner's mind or original mind, a mind not limited by old concepts, open to each moment as if it were the first time. Shunryu Suzuki wrote, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few." The expert mind has allowed the wave function to collapse into fixed patterns. It knows how everything should be, and therefore it cannot see things as they are. Enlightenment, in this sense, is not about attaining a special state or acquiring secret knowledge. It is realizing that the wave function never truly collapsed. Only the discriminating mind creates the illusion of collapse. Reality is always an open field of infinite possibility. Only our fixed thinking turns it into a limited, determined world. When you see a tree, the mind immediately labels it tree and then stops there. But if you look without labeling, you will see a living, ever-changing phenomenon. Light dancing on leaves, green with 1,000 shades, shapes curving in the wind, life pulsing in every cell. The tree that the mind has fixed is a collapse of the wave function, an extreme simplification of an infinitely rich and complex reality. And this applies to every aspect of life. When you meet someone and think, "This is John," you have collapsed the wave function. You have taken a living, ever-changing being with countless aspects and possibilities and reduced it to a fixed concept, John, based on your past memories and experiences. You don't meet the real person in front of you. You meet your image of them. When you think about yourself and say, "I am shy," you have collapsed your own wave function. You have taken infinite potential and locked it into a narrow definition. And then you live according to that definition, not realizing that it is only one of countless ways you could be. So how do you live in the state before the wave function collapses? How do you experience reality as an open field of possibility rather than a collection of fixed objects? This is precisely the art of meditation, not as a technique to achieve something, but as a way of living in openness, in not knowing, in the eternal freshness of the present moment. The paradox of measurement: the more you grasp, the more you lose. There is a famous Zen story. A student asked the master, "What is enlightenment?" The master replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The student was confused. "But everyone does that?" The master said, "No. When they eat, they think 1,000 thoughts. When they sleep, they dream 1,000 dreams." That is the difference. This story points to a profound paradox that both meditation and quantum physics expose. The more we try to grasp, analyze, and measure an experience, the more we lose its true essence. When you eat without really eating, your mind is elsewhere, analyzing, evaluating, comparing. You have turned a direct, living experience into a dead concept. You have measured it, and in the process, lost it itself. Heisenberg showed that in the quantum world, you cannot have both precision about position and velocity. You must choose. Do you want to know exactly where the particle is, or do you want to know exactly how it's moving? These two types of knowledge are mutually exclusive. In life, we face a similar paradox. You cannot simultaneously live an experience and analyze it. You cannot simultaneously be the flow and the observer of the flow. Think about a moment when you were completely immersed in an activity, perhaps playing music, painting, playing sports, or even a deep conversation. In those moments, there's a sense of losing yourself. You're no longer self-conscious about what you're doing, no longer evaluating or judging. You and the activity have become one. These are what psychology calls flow states, and they're often described as the most satisfying experiences in life. But what happens when you become self-conscious? When you start observing yourself and think, "Oh, I'm in a flow state," immediately that state disappears. By measuring the experience, you have broken it. By creating distance between the experiencer and the experience, you have fallen out of unity. This is why many people struggle with meditation. They sit down with the goal of achieving some state, peace, stillness, enlightenment. But the very effort to achieve, the constant measuring, have I gotten there yet? Am I making progress? That is precisely what prevents the experience from happening. Just as you cannot fall asleep by trying to sleep, you cannot achieve stillness by trying to achieve it. The very effort is the disturbance. Lao Tzu said, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name." The moment you try to grasp, define, measure truth, it has slipped away. Not because it is mysterious or inaccessible, but because its nature cannot be imprisoned in concepts. It's like trying to hold water in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it flows out. In science, we call this the observer effect. The presence of the observer changes the phenomenon being observed. In social psychology, there is the Hawthorne effect. People change their behavior when they know they're being observed. In quantum physics, it's the uncertainty principle. And in meditation, It's the realization that the I trying to achieve enlightenment is the only obstacle to enlightenment. So what is the solution? Should we stop observing, stop being aware? No, that would be falling into ignorance. The key lies in a different kind of awareness, an awareness that does not create separation between the observer and the observed, an awareness that does not try to grasp, measure, or change, but simply is present with what is. This is what meditation masters call pure awareness or pure presence. It is not thinking about experience, analyzing it, or even remembering it. It is simply the experience happening without an I standing outside commenting on it. When you hear a sound with pure awareness, there is no you listening and sound being heard. There's only the event of hearing taking place. No measurement, no judgment, no separation. And in this kind of awareness, something miraculous happens. You don't lose the experience by observing it. On the contrary, you experience it more fully, more deeply, more vividly than ever. Because you're no longer filtering it through the screen of concepts, expectations, and judgments. You meet it directly as it is in the freshness and uniqueness of this moment. Quantum superposition and non-discriminating mind. One of the strangest aspects of quantum mechanics is the principle of superposition. According to this principle, a quantum particle can simultaneously exist in multiple different states until it is observed. The most famous experiment illustrating this is Schrodinger's cat, a thought experiment in which a cat in a sealed box is considered simultaneously alive and dead until the box is opened and observed. This sounds absurd to our ordinary mind, trained to think in binary logic. Something is either A or B. It cannot be both. But reality at the quantum level does not follow this logic. It exists in a state of both and neither until the act of observation forces it to choose a specific state. And this is where quantum physics meets Eastern philosophy in an astonishing way. In Buddhism, there is the concept of not one, not two, non-duality. In Taoism, there is the idea of yin-yang, two opposite but inseparable sides coexisting in one whole. In Zen, there are koans like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Questions designed to break binary thinking and lead the mind to an understanding beyond ordinary logic. All these traditions point out that reality cannot be captured by the opposing categories of discriminating thought. Life is not good or bad, not success or failure, not happiness or suffering. It is an indivisible whole where all opposites coexist and interpenetrate. When you experience a complex emotion, such as the bittersweet feeling when watching a beautiful sunset, you are experiencing a kind of superposition of mind. It is neither joy nor sadness, but both simultaneously, and even more than that. But the discriminating mind is not comfortable with this ambiguity. It wants to categorize, label. What emotion is this? How should I feel about it? And in the process, it breaks the richness of the actual experience. In meditation, you learn to live with this ambiguity, with the superposition state of experience. You learn not to need to resolve everything into clear categories. You can sit with an uncomfortable feeling without needing to know what it is or what to do with it. You can experience the stillness of mind without needing to label it as good or progress. You can simply be with what is in all its complexity and contradiction. This is what Zen calls non-discriminating mind, a mind that does not divide reality into separate pieces, does not impose its categories on the flow of life. It doesn't mean the mind becomes blind or passive. On the contrary, it becomes sharper, more sensitive, because it is no longer obscured by the filters of concepts. Imagine you're walking in the forest and see a snake on the path. The mind immediately reacts. Danger! Must avoid. But when you get closer, you realize it's just a branch. In that first moment, the mind collapsed the wave function. It took an ambiguous experience and turned it into a concrete reality based on its experience and fear. It didn't see what was there, but what it thought was there. The non-discriminating mind would look without immediately concluding. It would hold space for uncertainty, for possibility. It would see a long curved shape on the path without immediately jumping to snake or branch. And in this openness, in this not rushing to conclusions, there is an amazing freedom and aliveness. This is not just an abstract meditation practice. It has profound implications for how we live every day. How many conflicts and relationships arise from us collapsing the wave function too quickly, seeing an expression on someone's face and immediately concluding they're angry with me, without leaving space for other possibilities? How much suffering arises from us categorizing experiences as good or bad, rather than simply experiencing them as they are? Quantum superposition teaches us that reality is inherently open, multidimensional, unable to be reduced to simple categories. And the non-discriminating mind allows us to live in this openness without always needing to resolve, categorize, control. It allows us to live in not knowing. Not the not knowing of ignorance, but the not knowing of wisdom, recognizing that reality is always vaster, richer, more mysterious than any concept we can have about it. Practice non-judgmental observation meditation. In the first week, start with 15 minutes each day. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Sit in a comfortable but alert posture, back straight but not rigid, hands resting gently on your thighs. Close your eyes or look down at a point in front of you with a soft, unfocused gaze. Begin by simply paying attention to your breath. Don't try to change it, just let it be natural as it is. Notice the sensation of air entering and leaving your nose, the rising and falling of your belly, the gentle movement of your chest. You're not trying to achieve any state. You're just observing what's happening. After a few minutes, expand your awareness to include the entire experience of the present moment. Notice the sounds around you: traffic, birds, wind. Don't label them, just listen. Notice the sensations in your body: tension in shoulders, warmth in belly, touch of clothing on skin. Don't judge them as comfortable or uncomfortable. Just be aware of them. When a thought arises, and it will, don't try to push it away. Instead, notice it as you would notice a sound or sensation. See it arise, exist for a while, then dissolve. You don't need to follow it, don't need to analyze it, don't need to do anything with it. Just be aware it's there, then gently return attention to breath and body. What's important is the attitude you bring to this practice. You're not trying to achieve an empty mind or a special peaceful state. You're just practicing observing without judging, being present without trying to change. If your mind is full of thoughts, that's okay. Just observe that. If you feel restless or bored, that's okay. Just be aware of that. Every experience is welcomed. Nothing is wrong. In the second week, start noticing the moment before you label an experience. When you hear a sound, there's a brief moment before the mind says car or bird, a moment of pure sound, not yet conceptualized. Try to catch that moment. When you feel a sensation in your body, there's a moment before the mind labels it pain or itch, a moment of pure sensation, not yet judged. Rest there. This is where you begin to directly experience the uncertainty principle in your own mind. You'll see that the act of labeling, categorizing, judging changes the nature of experience. A neutral sensation, when labeled pain, suddenly becomes something to avoid. A sound, when labeled noise, suddenly becomes an intrusion. But before labeling, there is only pure experience. Not good, not bad, simply as it is. Practice of observer awareness. After 2 weeks of basic practice, you're familiar with observing the objects of awareness: breath, sensations, thoughts, sounds. Now, turn your attention toward the observer itself. While sitting in meditation, ask yourself, who is observing? Don't try to answer with words. Instead, feel into the question. Direct awareness toward awareness itself. This may feel strange at first, as if you're trying to look into your own eyes. But persist. When you observe a thought, notice what is observing that thought. When you're aware of breath, notice what is aware of the breath. You'll begin to recognize that there's a vaster, deeper awareness lying behind all specific experiences. This awareness has no shape, no color, no specific characteristics. It's not a thing, but a space, the space in which all experience arises and dissolves. It's like the sky through which clouds pass. The clouds, thoughts, emotions, sensations constantly change, but the sky awareness is always there, unaffected. When you begin to recognize this awareness, something miraculous happens. You realize that you are not the content of mind, the thoughts, emotions, stories, but the space of awareness in which all of this arises. An anxious thought may arise, but you, awareness, are not anxious. A sad emotion may arise, but you are not sad. They are just phenomena passing through your field of awareness. This is the direct experience of non-self that the Buddha taught. There is no fixed, separate I. There's only vast, open awareness in which all experience comes and goes. And in this awareness, you find an amazing freedom. Because if you're not the thoughts and emotions, then they cannot control you. They are just weather passing through the sky of awareness. Practice of living in superposition. In daily life, practice not rushing to conclusions, not quickly categorizing experience into rigid categories. When you meet someone, instead of immediately labeling, I like this person or I don't like this person, hold space for uncertainty. Observe without judging. See them as a complex, multidimensional being who cannot be reduced to a simple concept. When a difficult situation arises, instead of immediately jumping to this is a problem or I must fix this, pause. Recognize that this is just how your mind is interpreting the situation. There may be many other ways of seeing it. Hold space for the possibility that you don't know the whole story, that there are aspects you haven't seen. When a strong emotion arises, instead of trying to identify exactly what it is, I'm angry or I'm sad, simply be with its energy. Feel it in your body without labeling. You may recognize that it's not a pure emotion, but a complex mixture. There may be anger, but also hurt, fear, sadness all at once. Don't try to separate them. Live in their superposition. This is especially important with self-judgments. When you catch yourself thinking, I'm a failure, or I'm a success, recognize that these are just concepts the mind is imposing on your complex reality. You're not a fixed thing that can be defined. You are a dynamic process, always changing, with countless possibilities. Don't let the mind collapse your wave function into a narrow definition. This practice will slow down the automatic speed of the judging mind. It will create a gap between stimulus and response, a gap in which freedom lies. In that gap, you can choose how to respond rather than being driven by old patterns. You can see the situation freshly, not through the filter of past experience. Practice with paradox. Once or twice each week, spend time contemplating paradoxes. Choose a Zen koan or philosophical paradox and sit with it, not try and solve it with logic. For example, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Or can a cat be simultaneously alive and dead? Or if the observer is the observed, then who is experiencing this? Don't seek answers. Instead, let the question dwell in your mind. Feel the discomfort when the mind cannot resolve it in the usual way. Notice how the mind tries to escape this uncertainty. It may try to analyze, rationalize, or simply give up and think about something else. But persist. Hold the question gently, without forcing. This is practice in training the mind to live with not knowing, with ambiguity, with what cannot be resolved by binary logic. It teaches you that not everything needs to be understood in the way the analytical mind wants to understand. There's another kind of knowing, a direct, non-conceptual knowing that lies beyond the reach of thought. Sometimes in unexpected moments, perhaps when you're washing dishes, walking, or even when you're not thinking about the question, something will open up. Not a verbal answer, but a direct recognition, a sudden seeing beyond logic. This is what Zen calls kensho, glimpses into the nature of reality. They cannot be forced, only prepared for by softening the mind, making it more flexible less rigid in its thinking patterns. Practice before the wave function collapses. Throughout the day, practice catching the moment before the mind labels and categorizes experience. When you see someone walk by, there's a brief moment before the mind says man, tall, handsome, etc. Try to rest in that moment of pure perception before all concepts are imposed. When you eat, put food in your mouth and notice the first moment it touches your tongue before the mind says delicious or not delicious, before it compares with previous meals, before it starts telling stories about it. Just pure taste, pure sensation, pure experience. When you listen to someone speak, notice the moment before you begin interpreting, judging, or preparing your response. Just the sound of the voice, the rhythm of words, the energy of the person speaking. In that moment, you're truly listening, not through the filter of your opinions, expectations, or agenda. This is the practice of living in the state before the wave function collapses, in the open field of infinite possibility, before the discriminating mind narrows it into a specific, limited reality. It requires continuous alertness, because the mind tends to automatically label and categorize very quickly. But with practice, you'll become faster at catching that moment, and you'll begin to live more and more in the freshness, aliveness, richness of direct experience. You'll realize that life as you've experienced is mostly a collection of concepts, stories, interpretations, not actual reality. You've been living in a world of copies, maps, symbols, and you've forgotten the actual territory. This practice brings you back to the territory, to the living, direct, unconceptualized experience of life as it is. Practice with uncertainty. Choose an aspect of life that you usually try to control or be certain about. Perhaps plans for tomorrow, a relationship, your career, or even the image you have of yourself. For 1 week, practice releasing the need for certainty about it. Each time you catch yourself trying to calculate, predict, or control, pause and say to yourself, I don't know. And that's okay. This doesn't mean becoming irresponsible or passive. You can still plan, act, and make decisions. But you do so with the recognition that you cannot control outcomes, that life is always vaster and more surprising than your plans. You hold your plans lightly, ready to adjust as reality reveals itself. Notice the discomfort when you release certainty. The mind may rebel, create anxiety, demand that you figure it out immediately. But sit with this discomfort. Recognize that the need for certainty is the source of much stress and anxiety. When you can live with uncertainty, when you can say, I don't know, without feeling unsafe, you've found a deep kind of freedom. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle teaches us that uncertainty is not a defect in our knowledge, but a fundamental characteristic of reality. The universe at the most fundamental level is open, indeterminate, full of possibility. When you accept this, not just as an intellectual idea, but as a living reality, you stop fighting with life and start dancing with it. Practice dissolving boundaries. Once each day, practice dissolving the boundary between self and world. Sit somewhere, perhaps in a park, by a window, or even in your room, and begin noticing the sense of inside and outside. Feel your body as a boundary between me and not me. Then begin softening this boundary. Notice that the air you're breathing in from outside becomes part of inside you. Sound from outside creates vibrations in your ear, becoming part of your inside experience. Light from outside touches your retina and becomes inside awareness. The boundary is not as clear as you think. Expand further. Recognize that your body is made from food you've eaten, from water you've drunk, all from outside. Every atom in your body was once part of a star, of the ocean, of another creature. Nothing in you truly belongs to you. Everything is borrowed. Everything is flowing through. And if you look even deeper, you'll see that even your consciousness is not a separate thing. Your thoughts are formed from language you learned from others, from ideas you absorbed from culture, from experiences you had in relationship with others. There is no independent, self-existing I. There is only an infinite network of relationships and interdependence. When you see this, not as an idea, but as a direct experience, something miraculous happens. The feeling of isolation, separation begins to dissolve. You realize you're not a tiny island in a vast, indifferent ocean. You are a wave in the ocean, inseparable from the whole, yet also unique and beautiful in your own way. This is the experience that Buddhism calls non-self and quantum physics calls entanglement. The recognition that everything is connected, that nothing exists independently. And in this recognition, you find a natural love and compassion. Because if others are not truly separate from you, harming them is harming yourself. Caring for them is caring for yourself. Conclusion: when science and spirituality meet at home. There is a Zen story about a scholar who came to visit a meditation master to learn about Zen. The master began pouring tea for the scholar, but continued pouring even when the cup was full, tea overflowing onto the table. The scholar cried out, "Stop! The cup is already full." The master smiled. "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen if you don't empty your cup first?" For many centuries, science and spirituality have been seen as two separate, even opposing paths. Science was supposed to be rational, objective, material. Spirituality was supposed to be intuitive, subjective, transcendent. But with the emergence of quantum physics, this boundary began to blur. And what we discover is that both point to the same truth, just from different directions. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle is not just a physical law about the behavior of subatomic particles. It is a window into the nature of reality, a reality that is not fixed, not objective, not separate from the consciousness observing it. It tells us that the universe is not a deterministic clockwork machine that we can fully understand from the outside. It is a dynamic creative process of which we are an inseparable part. And this is exactly what meditation masters have taught for thousands of years. That the seeker and the sought are one. That the observer and the observed are inseparable. That reality is not something out there, but something being co-created in each moment through the interaction between consciousness and phenomenon. When you truly see this, not as a theory, but as a living experience, everything changes. You stop trying to control life and start participating in it. You stop trying to grasp reality and start dancing with it. You stop trying to become someone and start simply being. This is not some mystical state difficult to grasp reserved for special people. It is the natural birthright of every human being, the capacity to live in the freshness, freedom, aliveness of the present moment. It only requires one thing: willingness to let go of everything you think you know about reality, about yourself, about life, and meet each moment as if it were the first time. Heisenberg showed that we cannot know everything about a particle. But perhaps this is not a limitation, but a liberation. Perhaps not knowing is not the enemy of wisdom, but the gateway to it. Perhaps in releasing the need to grasp, control, and be certain, we open to a deeper kind of knowing. A knowing not through concepts, a knowing by being life itself. Quantum physics has brought science to the threshold of mystery. Meditation invites us to step through that threshold, not to find answers, but to live in the question. Not to resolve the paradox, but to become the paradox. Not to attain enlightenment, but to recognize we never left it. In this moment, the moment you're reading these lines, the wave function is collapsing. Awareness is meeting phenomenon. The observer and the observed are co-creating reality. And in this simple miracle, in this extraordinary ordinariness, enlightenment is happening. Not somewhere in the future, not after years of practice, but right now, right here. The only question is, are you empty enough to recognize it? Can you let go of everything you think you know and simply look? Can you live in uncertainty, in not knowing, in the infinite openness of the present moment? If so, then science and spirituality are no longer two separate paths. They are two ways of speaking about the same journey. The journey from the illusion of separation to the reality of connection, from the prison of certainty to the freedom of not knowing, from the sleep of the discriminating mind to the awakening of non-discriminating awareness. And in that journey, you're not going anywhere at all. You're simply waking up to where you've always been, right here, right now, in the indescribable perfection of what is.